Today's story is really disturbing. It's basically like a cross between a true crime mystery and a full-blown horror story. But independent of what you believe in terms of what actually happened here, what you're going to hear about is totally bizarre. This is fully rooted in a logical explanation. I'm telling you, there's not really a great explanation for exactly what went down here. Before we get into today's story, if you love strange, dark, and unsolved mysteries delivered in story format, then please make sure to subscribe, because that's the kind of content we post. And if you enjoyed today's story, please give this video a thumbs up and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. One cold morning in late March of 1922, a 63-year-old farmer named Andreas Gruber stepped out of his farmhouse in Hinterkaifeck, Bavaria, Germany, to check on his animals. It was a routine he'd done thousands of times. The farm was remote, sitting about 70 kilometers north of Munich, surrounded by forests and fields. The nearest neighbor was far enough away that you really couldn't see their house from Andreas's property. Now, Andreas was walking back from the barn when he noticed something in the fresh snow that made him stop, dead in his tracks. Footprints, leading from the edge of the forest straight to his barn. At first he thought, maybe it's a neighbor cutting through the property, but then Andreas noticed something that made his blood run cold. There were no footprints leading away. Whoever made those tracks had walked to his barn and either vanished into thin air, or they were still there. Andreas followed the footprints, step by step. They went right up to the barn door, then stopped. He opened the door slowly, looked inside. No one there. He searched every corner of the barn, the loft, the store, nothing. But here's where it gets worse. That night, as Andreas lay in bed next to his wife, 72-year-old Frau Gruber, he heard something that made his heart race. Footsteps in the attic, right above his bedroom, walking back and forth. Andreas grabbed a lamp and went upstairs to check. The attic was empty, completely empty. But the floorboards, they were still warm, like someone had been standing there just moments before. Over the next few days, things kept happening. Andreas found a newspaper on his property, one he'd never seen before, not from their village, someone else's newspaper. Then his keys went missing, the ones to the tool shed. He knew he'd locked it, but someone had taken the key. And every night the footsteps in the attic continued, walking, waiting. Andreas told his wife, he told his daughter, 35-year-old Victoria, who lived with them along with her 2 children, 7-year-old Kazilia and a 2-year-old Joseph. They all heard it, the walking above them, the creaking. But what could they do? Call the police from the village 4 kilometers away? Tell them they heard footsteps? In 1922 in rural Bavaria, people didn't call police for sounds in the attic. There must be a genuine reason for that. Now here's something important you need to know. 6 months earlier, their previous maid had quit, just walked off the job without much explanation. But when pressed, she'd said something that haunted Andreas. She said that the house is cursed. There are voices when no one's there. I'm not staying another night. At the time, Andreas and his family had laughed it off. Superstitious nonsense. But now he wondered if she'd heard the same footsteps, the same sounds. And despite all of this, despite the footprints, despite the sounds, despite the warnings, Andreas made a decision that would seal their fate. He hired a new maid. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old, and she was scheduled to arrive on March 31st. In the early hours of March 31st, 1922, Maria Baumgartner walked up the snow-covered path to Hinterkaifeck farm carrying a small suitcase. So when Frau Gruber opened the door, Maria smiled and stepped inside. Then Frau Gruber smiled back at Maria and said, "You're very brave to come." Maria's thoughts ran through that word. That's actually a strange thing to say to a new maid. Maria thought the house felt wrong. She can't explain it, but she just has that feeling. The moment she stepped through the door, something in her stomach twisted. Frau Gruber seemed nervous, kept glancing over her shoulder, like she expected someone to be standing there. But Maria shrugged off her thoughts. Besides, she needed the money. Frau Gruber showed Maria to her room, a small servant's quarters off the kitchen. As they walked through the house, Maria noticed how quiet it was. Too quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, oppressive. "Lock your door at night," Frau Gruber whispered before leaving. Maria wanted to ask why, but something in the old woman's eyes stopped her. There was fear there, real, genuine fear. While Maria was unpacking, Victoria walked in. She wanted to tell Maria to run away while she still could. But she thought, how would she tell someone that is just resuming work to run? She just smiled at her and helped her unpack. That afternoon, Andreas went to the barn one more time. He needed to feed the cattle, needed to check on things. But when he climbed up to the hayloft, he found something that confirmed his worst fears. A blanket, folded neatly in the corner, and next to it a half-eaten piece of bread, fresh bread, from their kitchen. He thought someone had been sleeping here, maybe even the night before. Andreas grabbed his mattock, a heavy farming tool, like a pickaxe, and shouted into the empty barn. "I know you're here! Show yourself!" Nothing. That same day, around 6 p.m. while the family was having dinner, the room was quiet, too quiet that Andreas barely touched his food. He kept staring out the window at the barn. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the snow. Little Joseph, just 2 years old, started crying for no reason. He was just crying and pointing at the corner of the room. "Man," he kept saying, "man there." Gruber took Joseph upstairs to calm him down. Victoria stayed with her daughter, who was drawing pictures at the table. Andreas stood up. "I need to check the barn one more time and feed the animals," he said. Gruber begged him not to go. "Please, Andreas, not tonight. Stay inside, please." But he wouldn't listen. Stubborn man, always so stubborn. Andreas stood up. She watched from the window as he walked across the snow towards the barn carrying a lantern. He opened the door and then stepped inside. About 10 minutes later, Victoria was clearing the dinner table when she saw something that made her scream. A shadow figure moving past the kitchen window, slow and deliberate. "Mother, someone's outside," she screamed. Gruber rushed to the window. By the time she looked, there was nothing, just darkness and snow. "Your imagination," she said. But her voice was shaking. Later, they heard a heavy thud from the barn, like something or someone had fallen. Maria heard the thud and opened her door just a crack, and she saw Gruber and Victoria running towards the front door. Gruber was calling out to her husband, "Andreas!" Her instinct was telling her to run. Out the back door, across the fields, anywhere but there. But she followed them and ran towards the barn. Victoria and Gruber ran to the barn. The door was open. Andreas's lantern was laying on the ground, still burning, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Papa?" Victoria called out. Her voice echoed. Then she saw him. Andreas was lying face down on the barn floor, not moving, and standing above him, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure, holding the mattock, the same tool Andreas had been carrying. Gruber grabbed Victoria's arm. "Run," she whispered. But before they could move, the figure stepped forward, into the light. They couldn't see the face, something was covering it. But they could see the eyes, cold, empty, and human. Then the mattock swung. The pain was instant and blinding. Gruber felt herself fall down. She heard Victoria screaming her name. She tried to speak, to tell her to run, to save the children, but no words came, just blood. The last thing she saw was the figure moving toward her daughter, and then darkness. One by one, the figure killed Gruber and Victoria methodically, including Maria, the new maid. Back inside the house, Joseph and Kazilia were upstairs. They heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy but slow, coming closer. Kazilia, being the eldest, instantly pulled Joseph close to her and whispered, "Be very quiet." Then the door opened, and it wasn't Oma. The figure walked in, took Joseph first. He was too young to understand what was happening, too small to fight back. Then they came for Kazilia. She tried to run, tried to hide under the bed, but they found her. They dragged her to the barn. She saw Opa, saw Oma, saw Mama, all lying still in the hay. The mattock came down, but it wasn't enough. The blow didn't kill her immediately. She should have died, but she didn't. Here's where this story goes from horrifying to absolutely inexplicable. After the killer murdered all 6 people, Andreas, Gruber, Victoria, little Kazilia, baby Joseph, and Maria the maid, they didn't leave. They stayed in the house. For 3 days, the figure lived in the Gruber home, with 6 corpses on the property. Neighbors noticed smoke coming from the chimney. They saw lights in the windows at night, so they assumed the family was home, going about their business. But what they didn't know was that someone else was living there, eating their food, sleeping in their beds, feeding the animals. The cows were milked, the chickens were fed, the fires were kept burning. Whoever killed them cared for their farm. So on April 4th, 4 days after the family had been killed, the mailman noticed something odd. Mail was piling up in the Gruber's mailbox, unusual for such a punctual family. Finally, a concerned neighbor, Lauren Schlittenbauer, decided to check on them, and he'll never forget what he found. He went to the barn first and called out, "Andreas, you in there?" But there was no answer. He pushed the door open. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. There were 4 bodies, his wife, Victoria, and the little girl, Kazilia, all piled in the barn, covered in hay. Their faces were completely destroyed. He ran to the house and found baby Joseph dead in his crib. The maid, Maria, in her quarters, also dead. But there was something about the house that made his blood freeze. It was as if someone had been living here for days, walking over those bodies in the barn to feed the animals every morning. The house was clean and tidy. The kitchen table had been used recently, dishes washed and put away, food eaten. Immediately, he called the police. When police arrived, they interviewed over 100 suspects. Neighbors, former workers, relatives. It's the part that haunts investigators to this day. When they examined little Kazilia's body, the 7-year-old girl, they found something that suggested she didn't die immediately. Her wounds. Clumps of her hair were scattered around her body, hair she had torn from her own scalp. She lay there, in that freezing barn, listening to her family being murdered one by one, and she slowly bled out, for hours, maybe all night. The killer knew, and did nothing. No one was ever arrested, no one was ever charged. The killer, whoever they were, vanished. Over the past 100 years, various theories have emerged. One theory was Victoria's husband. He was officially killed in World War I, but his body was never identified. Maybe he came back. Maybe he was jealous of someone Victoria was seeing. Other theories suggest that maybe a neighbor or someone angry about a property dispute. Someone who knew the family's routine might have done it. Or it may be a drifter. A stranger who'd been watching the farm for weeks. Leaving in the barn, stealing food might have used the opportunity to take out the family. But the footprints from 4 days before suggest this wasn't random. Someone planned this, watched them, waited for the right time to attack. In 1922, investigators removed the victims' skulls and sent them to Munich for analysis, with the presence of cutting-edge forensic science at the time. The skulls were never returned. They vanished. Some say they were destroyed in World War II. Others claim they're still in storage somewhere, forgotten in a basement. Without them, crucial evidence is lost forever. The Hinterkaifeck farm was never lived in again. It was torn down in 1923. Today, a small memorial marks where it once stood. But locals say if you go there on quiet winter nights, you can still hear them. Footsteps in the snow, leading to where the barn once stood. Footprints that go only one way. And if you're foolish enough to follow them, you'll hear what Andreas heard. Whoever killed the Gruber family was never caught, never identified, never punished. The case remains unsolved. Over 100 years later, someone got away with murdering 6 people and then lived in their house for 3 days. Think about that. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's story in the comments. Who do you think the killer was? Please make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next upload. Till next time, stay safe.